All right, I'm live on YouTube and on Instagram. What's going on, guys? I see you guys trickling in here. You'll be seeing all about them tomorrow on our video, but we got in a set of Radflo 500R Sport 2.0 coilovers and shocks for Jeff's brand new sixth generation 2025 Forerunner. They're really solid. They're really solid options. So we're here to answer all your questions about those Radflos, any other Radflos, 6th gen Forerunner parts, everything like that. We're just waiting for TikTok to get all dialed in here while we wait for your questions. So you got some, get them in the queue. Because we're here to answer them.
We're good over here.
Good on the old tickers?
Yes, sir.
All right. So some guys over on YouTube. Looks like they had some comments on our posts. They're just saying how good Radflo is, and Radflo is great. So we just added on Radflo onto our site. We've been able to sell them for a while, but they're officially on our site now. So if you want to check them out, go on shocksurplus.com. We got the whole catalog. But these Radflo 500R Sport 2.0s, whatever, are really solid. I think they're going to be a strong contender for these entry-level, mid-level shock options. Very OEM plus. We've been driving around on them. They're super comfortable, super cush, and don't top out a lot. They actually have a secondary piston to reduce harsh top outs. Excuse me. Similar to like you would find on an OME MT64 Fox 2.5 HTOs. And even at the max 2-inch lift they set you up with, you still have like at least 3 inches of travel. So they don't top out like a lot of the cheaper stuff. Nick over on Instagram was asking 8112s for 3rd gen Tundra. We're weeks out. They're pretty much production ready. We're ready for them to officially launch them. We're expecting to see them in the next couple of weeks. Latest will be SEMA in November. So keep an eye on our feeds. We'll be seeing them anytime soon. What is the best option for 80 series with 6-inch only shock absorbers? Depends on how you're using it. Dobinsons are a really solid option. I believe they have 6-inch lift options. But for specific vehicle recommendations like that, go on shocksurplus.com, reach out to the team directly, and they'll be able to get you dialed in. We like to spend a lot of time on our recommendations so that we can provide exactly what you need and don't want to take from everybody else's time. So we got people on the phones ready to help you out there. King, Dobinsons, both great options. I'm pretty sure they have options at 6 inches of lift or can be. So does Radflo, I believe, and Radflo is going to be awesome. Just kind of depends on how you're using it and your goal. We're going to be seeing more Radflo 2.5, et cetera, soon. Yep, we are. We're going to be going through pretty much their catalog for Jeff's Forerunner. It's going to be a little bit before we get to the 2.5s though. Usually we like to start off with the more entry level options because that's when a vehicle is new, most people are looking at the more entry level options instead of going all hog wild. Right now we're doing Radflo 2.0s. We're going to go over, as other 2-inch body options become available, we'll be looking at those as well. And then, of course, getting to their 600Rs, 2.5s, the whole gamut. And we'll probably be throwing some Radflo 2.5s eventually on Brandon's Titan Swap Xterra because they got the best Titan Swap shocks out right now.
Fingers crossed.
What's your background? The background in the video is literally the media office. We got pretty lights. That's it. Our background in terms of like suspension, Shock Surplus has been around for, I think, 13 years. I went to the fab school for like suspension engineering and all that stuff, make race trucks and stuff. I can't weld to save my daggum life because I got hands shakier than Michael J. Fox. But I learned a bunch of stuff. So, I can tell you how to weld. If I time my pulses between my shakes, I can weld pretty good too. But learned all that stuff back then. My job experience. Yeah. So, I went to school for suspension engineering at the fab school. They kind of just off-road race trucks, that kind of stuff. And I because I was so bad at the welding thing, I spent most of my time focusing on like suspension design, engineering, all that kind of stuff.
When are we having a sale?
That's a good question. What's the next holiday coming up? That's a good question. I got a calendar. Probably the easiest way to know, because I'm usually the last to know about sales, if we're being honest, is you sign up for our mailing list or an account on our website. You'll automatically get discount codes, I think up to $150 off for $2,000 or more. And also we'll keep you up to date on all the things we're testing, of course, and all our upcoming sales. But usually we have sales around all the major sale holidays, Memorial Day, Black Friday, all that stuff. It looks like Radflo's here. What's up, Thomas? How y'all doing? We love these $500 Sport 2.0s. They're really good. Haven't taken them out on the dirt yet, but on the street, Jeff's been really liking them. It's actually the baby mama mobile. And the baby mama been liking it. So, when it's wife approved, they're pretty good. So the Ironman Foam Cell Pros, we've been very vocal about how they're just not the move at their price point, but the 2.5s look really good. And the crazy thing is they're only like fractionally more, like 10% more per application. We're definitely going to be testing those. They're ready to send us some because they're tired of hearing us talk trash about the Foam Cell Pros. Those look really good and look like a really good contender for the 2.5s and are a very good price point. They're priced like right at the MT64s and a lot of other options. So we're definitely going to be giving them a test. Seems like they kind of know what they're doing in terms of tuning. They can tune stuff. It's just they haven't had a good shock design out on the market yet. And the 2.5 monotube is a good shock design. Twin tube foam cells are garbage. We got anything over on TikTok, Brandon?
Not yet. Just the sale question. Yeah, if you guys share the live and invite your friends, if somebody else has a question you might know.
We got you. We're here to answer your questions. We're talking about Radflo today, but it can be obviously about anything else. We always do these lives ahead of our YouTube releases so that we can answer all your questions beforehand, and sometimes it informs the video we should be doing next. Thoughts on Radflo internal bypass from Trail Chaos? I think they're called the DRTs. Super solid design. They're very similar to the ADS MBR, in that they're like the sleeved internal bypass design functionally, but they got the ability to adjust each bypass zone by changing the hole size, rotating the thingy ding. And I think you can move the bypass positions up and down, which is super cool. Like if you had an external bypass and you wanted to move like your bypass ports, you're going to have to weld those holes shut, or you just get a new shock, weld those holes shut, drill in new holes, put in tubes in different places. It gives you a level of flexibility that is just not possible otherwise. And so I really like them. Haven't had a chance to test them, obviously. I don't know how many vehicle-specific applications are out yet, but I think they're going to be one of the better internally contained position-sensitive designs. And just that modularity, the adjustability, it takes a lot of boxes. And I think they're going to be one of the shocks, like the Bilstein 8112s and the ADS MBRs or Bilstein Blackhawks, when they come out with their universal 8112 variant type thing, are going to be one of the driving factors why a lot of people probably might end up only needing to get one coilover and not have to get a coilover and bypass at all four corners, because you can you have so much tuning. If you get if you can get the piston size you need, your money. Ever get crazy vehicles with portals that come in? Yeah. Actually, we had the Lords of Trail Militia. We're going to be working with Radflo, actually, this is perfect timing, about helping them dial in their setup with portals on their Bronco. The big thing about portals is most of the aftermarket suspension, like coilover lift solutions, are optimized in terms of travel range, at least, and sometimes spring rate, around at least a little bit of lift. Problem is, portals are going to give you 3 to 5 inches of lift. And also a lot of those coilovers limit upward travel for tire clearance. Like on a Bronco, the Radflows are 2.5s that they're running, which are great. Loves them. They're custom tuned. They're set up. They're really solid. But after they're set up around, let's say, clearing a 35, I think. At least 35, not a 37, which means there's some bump travel left on the table. If you have portals and your tire ain't going to be going up that high anyway. And also just, some further optimization. You end up having to run them so low that like you're kind of on the bump stop almost all the time. So we're going to be working with some different bodies and some different spring rates to lower that down. But yeah, we do occasionally we're starting to see more people with portals come in looking for suspension. And the big thing is having packages that are optimized around lower lift heights, but still have as much or more travel, because there is greater travel potential with a portal setup technically. Whether that can be utilized or not is vehicle specific. So yeah, and it's really about being lower than anything. So that's why kind of Radflo is really solid. They probably have the best program for setting up custom built shocks. Like the order form on the website's amazing. We can set up; it's super easy. Does that mean you're going to need to tune them after the fact a little bit more? Maybe not. You might have to, but they can get you a base tune and a setup that's like 98% of the way there. And if you do have to do any, adjustments, it's more about optimizing rather than making them work. So yeah, we get portal stuff. Radflo is a great company to look for pro stuff, because you might need to get something a little bit more custom to maximize the benefits of the portals and not also have to be 12,000 million feet in the air. What's going on TikTok?
We got a little debate going on between Bilstein and Ibach. Gabe asks, what are the best coilovers that don't require servicing? I'm looking at iBox now. Cade chimed in and said probably Bilstein's. He's had a set before that lasted. They were great until about 100K. So,
yeah.
On his 2018 F-150. So they're talking about picking Bilstein over Ibach and what might go into that. What vehicle do you have, Gabe? But otherwise,
it kind of depends on use case. And most likely, if you're comparing an Ibach to a Bilstein, if you are, you should be looking at the Stage 2 2.0 coilovers and the 6112s. In terms of normal use case, daily driving, mild off-roading, both are going to have a similar lifespan. In fact, almost identical. The Ibach is going to be a little bit softer in most cases. There are some, outliers, and it's not so much from tuning, it's from travel, where the Ibach might feel a little stiffer. The Ibach's also easier to adjust ride height on, obviously, because they're a threaded body. You can adjust them with them installed on the vehicle as long as it's on jack stands, and still will handle better than stock and be more supportive of the stock over bigger bumps. Ultimately, though, the Bilsteins are going to handle load much better. They're going to take much bigger bumps much better. They're going to survive much more serious abuse at the expense of maybe being a little bit firmer over smaller bumps at lower speeds. In our review where we compared them on F-150s, I think I said something to the effect of, do you like to go for a ride in your truck or do you like to drive your truck? If you want to go for a ride in a nice, comfy truck, you're not like a serious wheelman. You don't care about handling characteristics, being able to hit big bumps, doing all the hard trails and stuff like that. Ibachs are great. If you're like really a driver, you might prefer the Bilsteins despite them being a little firmer. So it kind of, you can't go wrong either way. I guess you could. If you wanted to send it to the moon every weekend and you bought the Ibachs, you're going to blow them up. Ask us how we know, because it blew them up. But in normal use cases, they're going to last almost forever and, be more comfortable than the Bilstein. So, do you want comfort? Do you want support?
Yeah, we got receipts on that one. Check out our YouTube page for that. He clarified it was a 23 SR5, but yeah, all of that still stands.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, just because we blew up the Ibachs, we drove them too hard. We did that.
We did that.
We did that. Ibach didn't do that.
That was way too much of a. You don't jump those.
Yeah.
And we jumped them, so that was on us.
So X Factor Adventure says Radflo 2.5s for his Lexus LX 570 on Werewolf portals, same as the Trail Militia setup. Anything I should be looking for as I start testing out next week? Yeah, realistically, the things you should be looking out for are, in terms of like what you might need to adjust on them. Um, the werewolf portals are steel, if I'm not mistaken. That's a lot of unsprung mass increase. That will be noticeable, especially with the tires. If you are noticing the tires are, leaving the ground, dribbling, the steering gets light over bumps, it's topping out super hard. You might need to take them back, get a little bit more valving in them, a little bit more high speed compression and high speed rebound. And then the other thing is, obviously, I imagine you don't want all the lift in the world. The portals give you a lot of lift to begin with. So what I usually say do in these kind of situations where you don't want to run too much lift is run them at the minimum recommended preload, and Radflo will be able to tell you what that number is. It might also probably be in the install instructions. And then, if it bottoms out in the areas where you're driving it, in the front, let's say, add preload until it stops bottoming out. And if it tops out, back off preload until it stops topping out. And that'll be kind of be your middle spot in terms of ideal ride height. Just because, that's really what we're concerned about in travel range, is making sure you're not hitting either extreme all the time or too often. You're flying 6 feet in the air, you're going to bottom it out no matter where your coilover is at. But, if you're bottoming them out over pebbles or topping out over like cracks, then we need to make some adjustments.
We've got a question from A. Hernandez. 22 F-150 FX4, rear block removed and forward lowering shackle. Want to upgrade from stock and get rid of. The back end is bucking out. Back is stiff, front feels loose. Anything we recommend? It's daily driving, some off-road, but not every weekend.
So you're going to try. So did I catch you're bringing it back to stock height? Because if it's going to be lower, there's nothing you can really, we could have the best shocks in the world. If you have 3 inches of bump travel, it's going to fucking ride like that.
Yeah, so you got to undo that.
Yeah, you're going to have to undo that. The other option is repositioning your shock mounts and doing a C notch so that you can have bump travel. Ultimately, though, starting at a lowered setup and going off-road is not really going to be conducive with each other, particularly on modern trucks where they do have so much, where if you were to bottom out your truck in, factory form, the rear is going to be like 2.5 inches taller than the front because it bottoms out before the front. Lowering the rear is really going to make for some bucking. Ultimately, our driving off-road, it, comes down to budget, what you're willing to spend. But I think step one is restoring it back to stock height, if not some lift.
Yeah, he said he's willing to do that. So that would be step one.
Yeah, that would be step one. And then after that, pretty much anything is going to feel better as long as it is a monotube design. Comes down to how much you're willing to spend. If you're wheeling it, if you're actually spending time off road, my bare minimum would be 6112s and 5160s. Anything beyond that is going to basically give you more overall comfort and the ability to drive faster off road or hit bigger bumps before it bottoms out. Leon said, someone comes in and just wants to send it with their truck with an unlimited budget. What are you recommending? Coilovers and bypasses probably, and it depends on the application. If money is no object, then we're not looking at bolt-on stuff, so we're looking at like long travel kits, weld-on shock towers so you could have more travel and things like that. And ultimately it depends on use case as well. If I was building an independent suspension rock crawler, which I know can sound kind of counterintuitive, but there's benefits. I like crawling with independent suspension on sometimes I would prefer a solid axle, but it's still sick. I wouldn't go to like, a Wicked Creations +5 kit. I might do a +2 track with, long travel with some portals, keep track with under control, if they had a Jeep and they wanted to go mock Jesus, I might be telling them to go call Kibby Tech and get that IFS front end. So yeah, it's application specific, goal specific, but it's all going to end with probably coilovers and bypasses and not stock mounts and 40s. If the tires start with a 3, don't talk to me. I've only had 38, so I'm just talking shit. Let's see.
Okay, I wanted to go coilover and external reservoir.
Coilover and external reservoir.
Yeah, this is the used to be lowered guy.
If you want to run coilovers in the rear, you're going to need to link it.
You probably
Coilovers in front. Yeah, I remember the word. Oh, excuse me. So the bare minimum kit for that would be like 6112s and 5160s. Whoa! Oh, I'm choking. So the BASB 86 recommendations for best affordable shocks for second engine Tacoma with a 6-inch lift. It depends on how that lift is set up. If it uses a spacer in the front, get some Bilstein 5100s and go for it. Otherwise, if it still runs good enough for you to trade it in the dealership, that is still an option because drop back lifts are the worst thing you can do. But without spacers, Bilstein, or with spacers, Bilstein's probably your best bet. If it doesn't use a spacer, I think Icon has 6-inch lift option for the coilover without a reservoir, and you could probably pair that with a 5100 rear shock, and it wouldn't be too bad. That's just going to need more service in the front than the Bilsteins. Every 40,000 miles or less, they're going to need to come off and be rebuilt. But again, you guys, for more specific vehicle recommendations, give us a shout directly on shocksurplus.com. We can get you dialed in. Once again, don't do drop bracket lifts. All else, so Leon YouTube says, all else being equal, do softer shocks last longer than stiffer ones? Do stiff shocks pass the force more to joints, control arms, body, etc.? Yeah. So if the shock has adequate damping force potential, no. So I'm going to say, it kind of depends on the longevity of the shock. A stiff shock, a super stiff shock, and a super soft shock are probably with the same seal packages, same body size, same piston size, same oil, will last the same amount of time probably on the street. Off-road, things will change. So you can kind of look at a shock life based on how many times it is cycled. Every time it compresses, it extends, it wears the seals and wear bands a little bit, generates heat, boils it, so a softer shock is going to cycle through more of its travel more frequently and theoretically will have a shorter service life. Stiffer shocks, stiffer suspension in general will transmit more load, more of the forces into the rest of the chassis as well. A good example of this is Bilstein, when they were setting up the 8112s for Broncos and trying to find the limits, which is actually kind of hard to do. You got to commit. With the high-speed compression, JCO, low-speed compression, everything full stiff, they weren't fully bottoming the shocks out, but they were starting to bend the tabs where the body mounts are. So the body mounts were compressing and hitting so hard over bumps because of the forces that were transmitted to them and not completely absorbed by the shocks and actually, denting things. There's lots of times where like on vehicles with long travel kits, they'll go to try to find the limit of their long travel kit with coilovers and bypasses and 15 inches of travel and rip the arms off the pivots. Because they are able to generate so much more force and absorb so much more force that like the arms containing or everything containing the suspension can't hold it. And another great example of this is Ford on the first gen Raptors, on like really tight kickers, like jumps with a really like short transition and a steep lip. We're actually bending the frames on first gen Raptors because there's the same frame as an F-150 right behind the bed or right behind the cab and the bed. They would end up touching. And after that, Ford actually reinforced the frame throughout the Raptors. And that stopped being as much of a concern. And these are conditions where the people were jumping it and they weren't knocking their feelings out. These were like middle-aged men flying through the air in their $50,000 Raptors, and somehow the frames were bent, but they could walk afterwards. So that's a condition where there's more suspension than there is durability of everything connected to it. Rough Country Vertex shocks. Yet to find a set that actually is tuned well and will last a significant amount of time. They seem to have a slightly shorter life than most other serviceable shocks. Seals are kind of unobtainium, and rebuilding them is like a nightmare. Their adjusters have a very tight adjustment range and are prone to like the knobs breaking. But if it gets you into a 2.5, it gets you into a 2.5. It's just probably not something you're probably going to replace them eventually. We're about buying once and crying once. And if, it's better to do the right thing first. Rough Country wouldn't be called Rough Country if their stuff worked well. So, but they are getting better. Build quality is a lot better than it used to be. So they're, pretty solid, pretty reliable. It's just when you do have to service them, you're kind of shit out of luck. And pretty much everything else is tuned better. But, I mean, you kind of expect that. I don't think the people who are building those shocks and tuning those shocks are in the same country where the vehicles are made, if you know what I mean. Anything over on the tickers?
We had a question about King 2.5s or Bilstein 8112s. I asked him what vehicle and driving style, but I haven't heard back yet. So
I mean, we don't even need to. Bilstein 8112s. Yeah. There's very few conditions where the King 2.5 might be better. The only situation where I think a King 2.5 might be better is if you are going to use a long travel kit that starts off with in the future or now that starts off with the basis of bolt-on coilovers like those, or shocks like those, at which point you can remove more travel limiting spaces on the inside and get more travel out of them, and would be easier to valve to pair with a bypass secondary instead of bump stops. But if these are your shocks, this is it. This is what you're doing. This is the end goal. The 8112s are the better set.
But like custom, different lengths and stuff. You might want to go for the
King. For custom, different lengths, or it's something that you might have to modify for a different kit in the future. King. Otherwise, Bilsteins. I live on the East Coast. I bought a King 2.5 for you guys during COVID. Was the best suspension that can stand East Coast winter. My King is rusted. So, zinc-plated shocks are not maintenance free. Anytime you go over salt, you need to clean them off. And you need to spray them down with a silicone-based lubricant, and they're not going to rust. Any steel body zinc-plated shock is going to do that. If that's something you just don't want to do, you don't want to spend the 5 minutes to hit them with a hose and spray them with silicone dry lubricant, like once or twice a winter. Then there are aluminum-bodied options in the 2.5s. Fox 2.5 Performance Elites, if available, are aluminum. The 2.5 Performance Series are aluminum, so that's also HTO. OME BP51s are aluminum, and I think that's all I can think of at the moment. Bilstein 8112s also now have the Evo gray coating, which is zinc plate, and then they put like what basically seems like Cerakote on the outside. So those will be like rust free for almost forever, but they are still steel, and eventually I'm sure that coating will give up and it'll get down to the zinc, and you'll have to keep an eye on them. But other than that, I guess Fox Factory Race Series as well. If you can get the 3.0s, a lot of them are steel body, zinc plated, and then over the top are Cerakoted. But for the most part, most people, for most applications, it's going to be Fox 2.5 Performance or Performance Elite, or Old Man Emu BP51s are aluminum and will never, at least not in our lifetime, corrode.
What's Roush doing? He was asked. This guy's another kind of general vague question about what's better if you're sending it or whatever. I would say 8112s because he asked Bilstein, Eibach, or Roush.
Roush is using Roush. I mean, it depends on the application. Roush is using either a Fox, a Bilstein, or a Coney. Realistically, not worth it because their off-the-shelf tuning is not optimized for serious high-speed off-road use. They're also a very basic, like the most basic model line in that. Solar Khan, hey bro, can you explain how preload affects ride over whoops? It's really affecting travel range for the most part. More preload means more up travel and less down travel. Less preload means more down travel and less up travel. There's kind of a sweet spot. If you run too little preload, it's going to bottom out too easily, or easier than it potentially could. If you have too much preload, it's going to top out. And so before, the tires go back to touching the ground again, after it's going over the whoop, they're going to run out of travel stop. And what'll end up happening is that event of the suspension running out of travel on droop will pitch the front end down. So it is important to have the optimal amount. Usually for high-speed off-roading in general, you shoot for more, you want to be higher up in your travel range, more preload, more lift, to get more bump travel, because you're trying to keep it from bottoming out. So my usual rule of thumb is add preload until it starts topping out and back it off a quarter or half inch. Leon asks, what would you rank the shocks you can get on trim straight from the dealer? Trail Hunter, Omi, TRD Fox, Raptor Fox, Chevy ZR2, Multimatics, Ram Blackhawks. So it's going to be Fox. Raptor Fox is the best. They're a 3-inch body, dual live valve internal bypass now. Then I would hesitantly say the Bilstein Blackhawks, because they're have live valve. They're electronically controlled on both compression and rebound. Then I'd probably say TRD Pro, and then I guess you could probably put Trail Hunter OMEs, which are 60 millimeter struts and shocks without position sensitivity, built by Bilstein. So basically 6112s, and 6100s, and the ZR2 Multimatics. The ZR2 Multimatics kind of have a problem with successive big hits. They can't dissipate heat all that well, and I don't think they can generate a lot of damping force, but they're very comfortable. The OME Trail Hunters are probably a little bit firmer, a little less comfortable, but probably more usable for the average person off-road. I think for an enthusiast, the Trail Hunter is probably a better setup. For your average Joe, the Multimatics might be better, but they're, you can interchange both of them, and they're at the bottom of the list. Anything over on tickers?
Not at the moment. Actually, just came in 2015 Silverado. What do I need to clear 37s?
2015 Silverado.
Yeah.
Since he didn't say it was a Duramax or made sure we knew it was a 2500 or 3500, I'm going to assume it's a 1500. Long travel and fiberglass.
15.
Long travel and fiberglass. Yeah. Honestly, probably not the right truck for fitting 37. Chevy tire clearance is really tight. It's going to probably be long travel fiberglass, and you're going to have to cut out your inner fenders or do a drop bracket lift kit. But I don't think a drop bracket lift kit is worth running 37s. I would rather do a little trimming, run 35s at like 3 inches of lift until I could afford a long travel kit to get 37s. But you're probably going to have to tub your fenders for that. How do the new Bilstein 8100 series compare to the Kings in terms of durability and rebuildability? They're pretty much as easily as rebuilt. We can get the seals, no problem. Not everybody, I think, bothers to check to see if they can get the seals, but they're just as easily sourced if you know where to look, whether it's shock seals or Bilstein directly. But the Bilsteins are going to have like 2 to 3, many times more service life. I don't know what they do with their seals. I don't know how they do it, but they seem to just like keep going and going and going and going. We have a lot of customers who go through like 2 or 3 sets of bearings and bushings before they need to like actually rebuild their shocks, which is saying something. Because usually you would have done bushings, bearings, and seals all together 3 times with the Fox or a King by the time you need to do that. By the time you need to do the Bilsteins. And may have been asked, but 25 Tundra TRD 4x4 recommendation suspension for off-roading, medium speeds. It depends on the terrain. And again, guys, for specific recommendations, go on our website, reach out to the sales team specifically. They'll be able to walk you through a direct recommendation. We like to spend a lot of time making sure you get the right setup, but I would say for medium, moderate speed stuff, probably like a really solid bang for your buck option would be like Icon 2.5 EXPs in the front and 6100s in the back. And then kind of play with it from there. I think OME BP51s are out for them if you're looking to spend a little bit more money and you prioritize comfort. Might have some load. Those are a really solid option. Dobinson MRRs, we tested them. They're very, very, very good. Haven't tested them back to back with like the OMEs or anything else yet, but they're a really solid, comfortable option, and I think could be set up for moderate speeds as well. But again, it depends on your budget, what you're looking to do. If you're doing anything more than 10 miles an hour off road, you're going to want a 2.5 at least in the front. And I think my bottom of the dollar setup would be like the 2.5 EXPs in the front for Icon and the 6100s in the rear. Leon asked, what's the best things a potential customer to say to you that would help you most finding a proper suspension setup? So yeah, I guess the questions we always ask are, how are you using it? And what are your goals? And oftentimes what you're looking to spend is going to be what it is. Budget is a very important thing, but, it's hard to get everything you want all at a good price. So we kind of focus on what you want, and then we kind of dwindle back the things we can live without, the compromise we can make to get you into your budget. But I think that, the best things is use case and your goals. And, goals is a very wide ranging term, but like how much lift do you want? What tires are you going to be running? How are you driving it? How are you planning on driving it? What are the trails you want to hit? That kind of stuff.
We got a life expectancy of a Fox. I told him we got a longevity video we just dropped, so you should check that out. But also,
so for a Fox, usually 100% street use, you're looking at 40 to 50,000 miles. The more you go off road, the harder you drive it off road, the shorter that service life gets. If you're racing it, it's like every 1,000 miles or every race. If you're never driving it on the street, it might be 10 or 15,000 miles. Most of our customers kind of fall in that, weekend warriors, occasionally wheeling it, maybe have some series fun sometimes. You're looking at that 25, 35,000 mile mark, but that might be changing. Fox recently started having, I want to say Teflon, or they've started using a Teflon impregnated oil instead of the old JM92. So we might be seeing some longer service lives out of Foxes going forward. I bought the iBox Pro Truck Lift 2R. Do you recommend to get a diff drop for a 24 Colorado? No, the iBox are built so that you don't need a diff drop. And if the only reason why you would even need an aftermarket control arm is if you went high enough to need it for alignment. They limit travel, particularly on those, so that would never be a concern. In most cases, a diff drop might be more detrimental than beneficial because since there isn't a CV bind issue, there's not going to be a CV bind issue at full droop. At full bump, on those Colorados, the CV angle might be worse, but so you probably can get away without it. Probably wouldn't hurt anything by having it, but it's money you could save.
We got Brandon Piazza asks, I have Fox 2.5, no resis on my Tacoma and 2.0 rear with Icon Adeleaf. Feel everything on the road, not comfy.
He has what? An Icon? Yeah, Icon 2.5 coilovers. I'm guessing it's a Tacoma.
Fox 2.5, no resi, 2.0s in the rear.
Oh, yeah. You have the old factory race series. Those
Icon
are
Adeleaf.
Yeah, the Fox factory race series is called the factory race series, or those old factory race series were called the factory race series because they intend you to be driving fast with them off road. So they're tuned really stiff. Pretty much anything is going to be softer, but you already have a decent set of coilovers. Might be worth your time, and they're probably going to be due soon for a rebuild. You might just try revalving them. It can be as simple. We've seen like benefits as simple as just drilling out some bleed holes a little further in there. Good. In the rear, the Icons aren't the stiffest thing on earth, but I think probably most of the harshness you're feeling is coming from the front because those Foxes are like the stiffest thing on earth. William DeGroat
I know it doesn't pertain to Radflos, but do you think a diff drop would be required on a Bronco with the Dobinson MRR? Absolutely not. Diff drops aren't required with the Dobinson MRRs. They are not long enough in the front to cause CV bind, so it's just a waste of time. We tested them. There's no bind present. The only coilovers that I know of offhand that are long enough in the front to cause the slightest amount of CV bind are King 2.5s, and that would be not a bad idea to get a diff drop. Ultimately, otherwise, nah. Unless you're adding spacers on top. What's the recommended service intervals on Radflo 2.0s going on a third gen 4Runner? We haven't been running Radflows enough to give you 100%. Seems like their seals might be on the longer lasting side. Again, it depends on use case. 100% street use, I would call us before 50,000 miles. 100% off-road before 10,000 miles, and you'll probably be at that 25 to 35,000 mile mark, similar to the Fox. What's going on, TikTok?
How long until my King 2.5 settle / break in? They feel very stiff with 300 miles on them.
They're probably not going to settle in all that much, for being honest. It also is imperative to figure out where they're set in preload. If you have most King coilovers, and most any coilovers are going to be optimized for a certain vehicle package. If your vehicle is on the softer side or on the lighter side, so like let's say you have a Tacoma and you're buying the coilovers, they're going to be set up for a crew cab V6, or if it's a new one, a 4-cylinder. If you had a second or third gen and you had a 4-cylinder extended cab 4-wheel drive, you're going to have to back off preload, potentially pull out some spring, but it's probably not going to get much softer for another 30,000 miles before they start wearing out. There are a lot of Kings, particularly the adjustable 2.5s, that are a little bit on the firmer side, particularly for applications that are typically used for going fast off-road. So that might be a condition where I don't know that they'll get all that much softer, but I might check my preload because you might have a little bit too much in it.
Yeah. Daniel just installed iBox Pro and Pro 2R. Is it possible to raise the rear some more? He says 2018 F-150 2.7 4-wheel drive.
Those will be good up to 1.5 inches of lift, but rear shocks aren't going to change the ride height on their own. The only reason why the coilovers do is because the springs attached to the coilovers. Springs hold the weight of the vehicle. They determine ride height. So you'll be able to gain up to like 1.5 inches of lift if you were to add a leaf, aftermarket leaf flag, blocks, you name it. But you're going to have to buy some parts to get that lift. Leon asks, even if one doesn't off-road at all, would any aftermarket shocks be better off than replacing with OEM, like when the stock shocks give out? Yeah, so, if you have a Raptor, you're never going off-road, just rebuild your shocks, don't worry about it. But most vehicles, the factory suspension is absolutely hot garbage. And if you go straight to the dealer, isn't very cheap. A lot of times you can get super basic, like 2-inch body monotube stuff like iBox Pro Truck Sports, Bilstein 5100s, 4600s, stuff like that. Even Fox 2.0s for similar to, if not less money than what the stock stuff costs, that will ride and perform better and potentially might even last longer because they're built for more serious abuse than you would ever do. So yeah, there is still a lot of benefit. We still sell tons of shocks to people who are never going to go off-road, and they're still very happy they made the purchase. You don't need as much shock if you're never going to go off-road, but there are benefits. It's going to be more comfortable. It's going to be more stable, even with a more basic shock package. And in a lot of cases, you might save money. So that's why, Bilstein 5100s, iBox Pro Truck Swap are so expensive. If, the dealer's going to charge you $800 for garbage and you can get not garbage for $500, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yes, sir. What are your thoughts on Deaver Leafs for a 2019 Up Silverado with 2.5-inch shocks? Yes.
Go for it. They have like 1 or 2 leaf springs in the stock leaf pack. It's incredibly undersprung. The Deavers will not only make it more comfortable, but probably better under a load and will last longer. We had a 19 Silverado, and within the 3-year lease, the leaf springs had already lost 1 inch of height. So, yeah, get those Devers.
Yeah.
They're worth every penny. And even if you don't want to spend that much money, the Dever Adelise work really well, and will improve the ride performance, big bump support and load stability. And we think we'll probably give you a little bit more life out of the Leaf Pack, because it basically goes from your primary spring to an overload, nothing in between. And I think a lot of those primary springs are composite, which is
So Larcon, how do you guys fine tune shocks?
Serviceable shocks. So we're not talking like Bilstein 5100s, I bought Pro Truck Sports, lesser stock, but higher end shocks can be taken apart, and we can change the tuning, the valving. Monotube based shocks work based on, at the end of that shiny little shaft that goes in the body, there's a piston, there's holes cut into the piston, and they are little shims, like little washers, thin spring steel, discs that sit on the piston and deflect to allow flow, but also restrict flow for the piston. Those are used to tune the shocks. If even if a shock is adjustable and we're out of adjustment, it's going to need different base valving or base tuning. So we would take the shock apart, change the thickness or diameter of the shims to determine, to change, the stiffness. So like, let's say blowing through all its travel all the time, it's bottoming out all the time. We'll go to the high speed compression side of the stack, and put a thicker shim that is harder to deflect out of the way, which will restrict more flow through the piston and therefore provide more support.
Sam says, when are we getting them iBot 2.5s? I told him we just saw them at Trail Pass.
Well, so this is some. Let's hope iBot's not in here so I don't get in trouble. We should have a set as early as next week to test on our F-150. They are going to be out and available in November for SEMA, for F-150s, Land Cruiser 250s, and I think New Dakotas. So we will be testing them as soon as the next 2 weeks. I think Sean put on the schedule, he wants to put them on the 30th. I don't know if we'll actually get to that soon. We'll have to see. But the F-150 parts are about production ready. We will be testing them soon. So we'll have a review out as soon as the parts are available. Gilo asks, how much lift is the sweet spot on the iBot Pro Truck lift stage 2R? Whatever they come out of the box at, usually. iBot usually presets and most brands will usually preset their coilovers to what they deem to be the ideal setting. Where you might vary from that, where your ride height might vary from that, will ultimately kind of be determined on use case. Other factors, but the important thing is optimizing upward and downward travel. The taller you are, the more up travel you have, but the less down travel you have, and vice versa. If you're spending a lot of time in rock gardens, you might want to back off a little preload. If you like to carry some speed, you might want to add a little bit of preload, but make sure you're making measurements to ensure you know where you are. So you'll want to measure from hub defender, sit on the ground, stock, and then hub defender when you put on the iBox in the front. Drive it around the block so everything settles in and scrubs out, and then take your measurement. That'll give you a reference. If they were assembled wrong or something like that, you'll also know if the preload's too high or too low. But usually they're out of the box where they're supposed to be. Otherwise, a good rule of thumb is usually splitting the ride height range in half. I'll have to double check what it is, but let's say it's 1 to 3 inch. I think it's 1 to 3 inch. 2 is probably the sweet spot, because it's right in the middle. Usually with most things, in the middle is the best. Have you guys always had a car lift, or is it recent? Noticed in most older videos you guys use jack stands. Yes, the lift is new. We recently took over the suite next door, put in a lift in so we can do more installs, more content, more same-day service, more everything. So yeah, that's new. We used to grind it out on jack stands, but now we got the lift. Very nice. It's a Max Jack's lift. Would recommend. It's a little slow to drop, but I'd rather it be too slow to drop than take my toes off.
The Marcos Perez says he installed a set of 2.5Ps on front and Fox 2.0s on the rear on an 18 Tacoma. Feels stiff all around.
one, check preload. Two, make sure you have the right. So if you have 2.5 PEs and they're not extended travel, I would almost guarantee you have too much preload in them, or they're not going to give you the lift you're looking for. If they feel stiff all around, the PEs are adjustable, so you need to play with that. 2.0 rear shocks are going to be about as soft as it gets. So if the rear is feeling stiff, it's either a length-related issue or a combination of the springs. But the Foxes are on the firmer side, but I would check preload, and you can adjust the stiffness on the Performance Elites. So I would start by backing off high speed and low speed compression all the way, and add in low speed compression until it's as stable as you want, or it starts to be a little harsh over smaller bumps and back it off a cliff. And then, add in high speed compression until it stops bottoming out in the areas you're driving. And if it doesn't bottom out, then brother, just leave it wide open. How much lift is that Stage 2R kit out of the box? I don't really know. It depends on engine option. Most cases in the installation instructions, iBot will tell you out of the box lift heights for, based on vehicle spec. So it will vary, crew cab, whatever, but they usually will tell you in the instructions.
Brandon Piazza follows up. I think he had two Fox 2.5s. If I upgrade my shocks from Fox IFP, should I go Performance Elite or 8112s? Weren't you talking about comfort before?
Yeah,
8112s
are going to be the most comfortable out of those two. If you are going to upgrade, you could get a much more comfortable ride out of a revalve, though.
True.
Yeah. We always say when you buy a set of 2.5 series shocks in particular or larger, unless you are, if you're unhappy with how they feel out of the box, unless it's just like you're out driving what the shocks would ever be able to do, a lot of times you can get them revalved and get it dialed in. So it's kind of nice when you get a good enough shock. If you're unhappy with your purchase, there is still, recourse to get happy.
Yeah, so not all is lost, and you still have the support from the larger diameter, but you're able to kind of soften it up to your liking.
Yeah. Hutchmacher 15, what are your thoughts on the Fox 3.0 factory race shocks for the F-150? I think those come in at like $7,000. You could probably put together a budget Raptor swap for similar money. So I don't know that spending that much is necessarily worth it on the F-150 when you could probably just go to the junkyard and get Raptor arms and some Gen 1 Raptor takeoffs and be in better shape. That said, for a straight bolt-on setup, the 8112s are definitely better. It's not a one-for-one comparison, but we had a customer come in with 3.0 factory race Foxes on his Bronco, switched to 8112s, and it was a game changer, despite the 8112s being like $2,000 cheaper. There is more distance between the primary ride zones and in the primary ride zone, and they add damping force out of the ride zone rather than bleeding it off in it. So you have more big bump support and a more composed feel in that primary zone. You can kind of feel the JCO and RCO engage more. They're a little bit more abrupt, but I think I prefer the feel of the 8112s over the Fox 3.0s. I think they're going to last longer, be, generally higher performing, and at least in the front. Honestly, what I would probably do if I were you would be 8112s in the front, bone stock Gen 1 Raptor rear shocks is probably the sweet spot, or a Gen 1 Raptor 3.0 bypass. I would do that before I would touch a Fox 3.0 setup, because I think that's a better value. And I might start looking into the cost of a Raptor swap, because suspension-wise, outside of the left fenders you might need, it probably is not much more, if you do it right. Cole Boyer, 03 4Runner with Dobson variable rate long travel coils, looking to replace my Bilstein 5100s with a plush riding long travel shock. Any recommendations? If you're going to keep it to the factory mounts, got to think about that. That's a good question. If you're keeping it to the factory shock mounts and want to have as much travel as you can, I would guess Dobinson MRRs are the most plush, but
because they're only a 50 millimeter piston, it seems to be really hard to get them dialed in. But they do have those long treble spec shocks. Those are pretty long. Otherwise, Fox, not the softest thing on earth, but Fox 2.5s are available in a 2 to 3 inch length. I think, honestly, I might be looking at calling Radflo, and we might get something custom built for a bolt-on setup. They probably have a way, they can probably get as much travel as the Dobinsons, and we could have them valve the way you want or closer to the way we want out of the box. So, speaking of Radflo, that would be a good condition for their rear shocks. Ultimately, yeah, I think probably a lot of the harshness you might be feeling, because I assume it feels a little harsh, is because the 5100s are too short for those springs. Miguel asked on Instagram, the Bilstein 5100s have regressive valves. They're digressive, and that's why they are a little harder. And the Fox 2.0 reservoir shocks are progressive valves. They're linear, and that's why they're a little softer. So Bilstein is digressive, Fox is linear. A digressive shock runs a greater amount of preload on the low-speed compression shims that is supposed to be overcome in a high-speed compression event. In English, that means they're supposed to be stiff over, against body roll, brake dive, squat under the throttle. They're supposed to bleed off stiffness over bumps. What ends up happening, particularly on the smaller body Bilsteins, like the 5100s or 5160s, there are some high-speed compression events or bumps that do not generate quite enough force to overcome the preload on the shims and get into the soft high-speed compression circuit, which can mean they can be pretty firm. Ultimately, though, there's a little more to it than digressive or linear. Linear riding better, digressive riding worse, because that's not always the case. And a lot of times it's speed dependent, because a lot of times the faster you go, softer a digressive gets, which is often the opposite with a linear shock. Ultimately, a digressive shock like the Bilstein will be able to function with a lighter spring rate. So if you are able to still achieve your ideal ride height with a softer spring, because of the digressive valve shocks, you will ultimately have a softer ride and in many cases better handling than a linear shock. So that's kind of like yes, a digressive shock is generally going to be firmer, at least over smaller bumps at lower vehicle speeds. That's not always the case, because it might allow for the allowance of a softer spring rate. A great example of that, first gen Tacomas, third gen 4Runners on their 6112s use like a 450 pound per inch spring, and the Fox Kings and Icons use a 550 or a 600. Because of that, although they may not be able to achieve as much lift as the extended travel coilovers, despite having the same amount of travel, they're spring rate limited. They will, many people have told us, and I can attest to it personally, that they are more comfortable. And that's because they're 100 to 150 pounds per inch softer on spring rate, which makes a big difference. Leon asked, what's a common myth or pet peeve for you when it comes to shocks and suspensions? One is that a lift kit automatically means a lift kit automatically means your vehicle is going to ride worse. Oh, you can't get a good ride. You haven't lifted Jeep. Modern suspension systems, 9 times out of 10, will ride better than stock if you get a good setup. So there's that kind of stuff. Another pet peeve is, I got death wobble. I need a new steering stabilizer, but my ball joints have 500,000 miles, is one that drives me up the wall. I think it's less common now because there's less vehicles that come with steering stabilizers. It's like just Jeeps, Ford F-250s, and Ram 25 or 3500 or Ram heavy duty. You get people be like, I need a dual steering stabilizer. I can't get rid of my death wobble. And it's like every single hole that on every single pivot on your truck is ovular because you waited way too long to change your bushings. Another thing that probably drives me up the wall is adding more preload or adding to a coilover means it's 100% going to ride stiffer, which just is an incomplete way of looking at things. And probably the biggest one and the most incomplete thing is I need X amount of lift to fit X amount of tires. It's just not true. The lift in and of itself is not allowing for the tire clearance. It's limiting upward travel that does it. And the lift ensures that you maintain at least the same amount of bump travel as stock. So let's say 2 inches before my suspension bottoms out, my 40-inch tires are trying to blow my fenders to the moon. Well, if I space my bump stops out by 2 inches and then do 2 inches of lift with a suspension that has at least 2 inches, that can extend at least 2 inches further, then I've maintained the same amount of travel in stock and the tires fit. But saying I got a 3-inch lift, I should be able to fit 35s and they don't fit, completely incomplete way of looking at things and completely ignores things like wheel size, offset, things like that. Would you recommend a 2.5 diameter shock for a Titan swap on a D41 Frontier, or would a 2.0 work? 2.0s will work. It just, depends on how you're using it. Brandon on the other side of the camera has Bilstein 5100s on his Titan swap, and it works so good. I'm very excited to find what 2.5s could do. I think the real deciding factor for you on whether you need a 2.0 or you can get away with a 2.0 or if you should go to a 2.5 is one, do you like to carry some speed off-road? You can find the limited 2.0s. The 5100s do things we didn't think should be possible, but you still bottom them out. 2, if you're going to be running more than a 33-inch tire, I just don't think these Nissans have enough spring rate to manage that weight. So you want the extra damping force to keep the tire from dribbling all the time over, chatter and stuff like that. Keep them, planted. I guess those would be the main reasons. If you're really driving hard off-road, you're going to want that 2.5. And the 2.0 is going to blow up, fast anyway. So that's going to be a waste of money. And if you have really big tires, and I guess if you have not just the unsprung mass of a big tire, but you have a lot of sprung mass, you have a bumper, you have a winch, you're going to have a rooftop tent, you're going to have load in the bed all the time. You might want that 2.5, particularly if the load varies. Constant, definitely, but if it varies, 100%, because usually you can have an overall softer setup while still being as supportive with a larger diameter body. That's kind of one of the really big benefits of having a bigger piston is you can have more support without it having to necessarily be stiffer in every condition. That's why we use the term it's more supportive, not necessarily firmer or stiffer.
Can Fox IFP be rebuilt? Technically.
Yeah, any Fox product can be rebuilt.
It's not always cost effective for those, right?
Yeah. So if it's a 2.0 IFP, it's not always cost effective. It is only cost effective on a 2.0. So if it's not a coilover, just a regular 2-inch body non-reservoir shock, you need to stay on top of your services. If you need to do anything more than just change seals and maybe a bushing, you're better off buying new because you're spending just about the same amount of money. But for anything better than that, 2.5 IFP, 2.0 IFP coilovers, it's usually worth it.
About time.
Yeah, it's about time. So we're going to wrap up our last few questions. 21 Toyota Tacoma. I currently have an Ironman lift. I'm not happy with it at all. Surprise, surprise. What would you recommend? I have bumpers and a winch. It depends on your use case. The cool thing about third-gen Tacomas like yours is everything is available. But, on the lower end, 6112s and 5160s are probably the best value on the market. We can load them up with 650 or 7-pound springs in the front. They'll feel great. A little on the firmer side, if you wanted to spend some more money for some more comfort, OME BP51s are great. If you kind of don't want to spend all that much money, but you might see the build is going to gain weight in the future, OME MT64s are a great option that really allows you to kind of keep the same springs, but be able to offset load as you add it. But it ultimately depends on how you're using it and your goals. For these specific recommendations, go on shockservice.com, reach out to the team. They'll be able to dial you in. Doug Bryant asks on YouTube, I lifted a fifth-gen Foreigner with Fox 2.5, 2 inches front and back, passenger side tires stick out about a half inch more than the driver's side. this is with a panhard correction. Can this be fixed? If your rear tires are further out, your panhard correction wasn't correct. If that was a vertical relocation, like a Dr. KDSS kit, you're going to need to play with the holes. You probably need an adjustable track bar. If you have an adjustable track bar, it's adjusted wrong. And then additionally, if the front is off as well, you need to center the rear axle and then get it realigned, because track width is probably all screwed up now. I'm going to the Icon 2.5 external travel remote reservoirs on a Tacoma. How am I going to like them over stock? We ran their adjustable, the CDCV, on our 5th gen Tacoma. Second gen Tacoma. I'm sorry. Second gen Tacoma. So basically the same truck, bigger motor, a little older. And we absolutely loved them. They are definitely on the firmer side, but they're nowhere near as firm as everybody complains about them being. And they're one of the best options for people, that'll let you take off your front sway bar. They're really solid. And I think they have the longest travel of everything out there. They're really good. 2 things to look out for. They're a 13-inch, 650-pound spring. So they're very, in terms of like ride quality, very sensitive to preload changes. If you need to add more height than how it is out of the box, we've had a lot of customers have better luck switching to a 14-inch 600. But bolt them on, try them, and then kind of work from there. But I think you'll like them a lot. I really like Icons. I really like what they've been doing with their valving as of late. And I don't think they get enough credit. They're really solid. They're on the Tacomas, they're linear on compression, digressive on rebound, which I think is a really solid compromise. And, although out of the box are optimized for a little extra weight, if you're planning on a bumper and winch in the future or already have it, they reward you for it. So you might find them to be a little firm initially, but when you get that bumper, you'll like them a whole lot. And honestly, they're not that firm. I like the way they feel. Res Taco, 34-inch tires, and would like to keep it 2.5 to 3-inch lift. I'm guessing it's a 2nd or 3rd gen Tacoma. The less lift you do, the more tire clearance you will have. If it's a 2nd gen, 2.5 to 3-inch, totally fine. If it's a 3rd gen, do not go over 2 inches. If you want to minimize how much you're trimming, check out Supro Pro's double adjustable lower control arms. You can add like 4 degrees. I don't know. You can push the front tires a whole heckin' lot, which will give you a lot more clearance and make it so you don't have to work as hard behind those front tires. If you pair them with an adjustable upper, like an SPC or any of the billet arms that are adjustable, like the Icons, which are probably the best, you can also make equal adjustments on the upper and lower, push the front tire forward without having to run as high of a caster value, which means there's going to be less bind. Your steering is going to be a little lighter, so you don't have to run like some people are on these Tacomas are at like 7-8 degrees, and it kind of drives like garbage. They're happier at that 5-degree mark, and you can run closer to 5 degrees and still have tons of, have the front wheel really far forward. So actually less is more, because you can push the front tire further forward, and more lift height's not really going to make the wheel tubs disappear. And the fenders disappear. So yeah, definitely do that. And then don't go crazy on offset if you haven't already. 8.5 with the 0 offset will have a pretty tight scrub radius and will minimize the trimming. You have to do 4.5 of the tire up front. In the rear, it's going to be easy money.
Last one from TikTok. Dylan asks, what do we recommend for a 2019 Escalade with mag ride? He thinks the shocks are going bad and wants to mag delete.
It depends on how you're using it and your goals. Again, guys, for specific vehicle recommendations, go on shocksurplus.com. We can get you dialed in. The one thing I will say about that is you need to go with a loaded coilover strut in the front, because a lot of times the parts will not be applicable. Additionally, most of those Escalades have the self-leveling rear suspension, so you might need to get a rear spring from a Tahoe or Suburban without that package. And then the last thing is, on certain years, and I'd have to look it up, but the shoulder on the bolt, not the threads, not the head of the bolt, the shoulder that actually goes through the bushing on the rear shocks on the upper, I believe is a different size on the mag ride stuff, so you might just need to get that bolt. And
The nut will work. The bolt just might need to be changed. But look at loaded stuff. Bilstein 6112s, Fox 2.0s. If you want to know your replacement, KYB, or look north of that, definitely want to get a coilover, rear shock. You might have to get a rear spring, most likely. And last question on Instagram. Oh, Gilo wants to know, would the Eibach Pro Truck Stage 2R better than stocks overall for ride quality? Yes, they're going to be much more comfortable and composed than stock. They are one of the more comfortable options at their price point without sacrificing handling. I like to call them very OEM plus. They will do a slightly better job than stock at all the stuff the stock stuff does well, and do an exponentially better job at the stuff the stock stuff sucks at. So they're good. Not going to be something you can send to the moon or run a 40-inch tire on, or even a 35-inch tire on, or load your house on the back of, but they're definitely going to be more comfortable. They're definitely going to be more composed both on and off the road. But that wraps it up for today. This will be up live if you guys want to refer back. And tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll be dropping our unboxing video about these Radflo 500R Sport 2.0 coilovers and shocks for just 6th generation 2025 or newer. 400 and, well, they're a pretty good set of shocks, so I definitely recommend checking them out. Then we're going to show you how to put them on in our next video. And after that, we'll be showing you how they ride. So if you're not already subscribed, hit that bell icon. Make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube, on Instagram, TikTok, all of our socials, so you can keep up to date, because we're going to be giving you the whole breakdown on those and everything else we carry. We're going to test everything we got. So, if you're patient, you want to see something tested, you'll see it eventually. And again, if you guys want recommendations, you're looking to order a set of shocks, go on shocksurplus.com. And like I say every time, we'll see you out on the trails.
Thanks, everyone.